Have you ever wondered why some names echo through history while others fade into silence? When people talk about the Raiders, we always hear about the biggest legends: Marcus Allen, Bo Jackson, Tim Brown, names every football fan knows. But what about the others? What about the players who broke barriers, carried the team through impossible battles, or even changed the way the game is played, yet were never truly thanked? In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on those forgotten heroes. 10 Raiders who shaped football itself. 10 men who stood in the fire, changed the outcome of games, and inspired generations, yet rarely get their due credit. Some were Iron Men who played through pain. Some were innovators who redefined their positions. And some were stars whose greatness was buried under politics, bad timing, or simply the weight of bigger names. By the end of this video, you'll know their stories. You'll see how much the NFL owes them. And you might even start to wonder, why didn't anyone thank them? Stick around until the end, because number one on this list isn't just underrated. It's a story that could change the way you think about Raiders history forever. Welcome to History of Raiders. If you love deep dives into football's hidden stories, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the forgotten Raiders who changed football forever. 10. Terry McDaniel. Terry McDaniel is a name most casual football fans don't remember, but in the late 1980s and early 90s, he was the heartbeat of the Raiders secondary. Drafted in the first round in 1988, McDaniel stepped into a defense built on toughness and swagger. He didn't just blend in, he set new standards. What made him special wasn't only his speed, though he had plenty of it. It was the way he read quarterbacks. He had that rare instinct, the ability to jump a route a split second before the ball was released. And when he got his hands on the ball, it didn't always end with a simple turnover. McDaniel turned defense into offense. He returned 4 interceptions for touchdowns.
In his career, a franchise record at the time. Each one was a game changer, the kind of play that flipped momentum and silenced entire stadiums. By the early 1990s, McDaniel had become one of the most respected cornerbacks in the league. He was selected to the Pro Bowl 5 years in a row, from 1992 through 1996. Week after week, he lined up against the NFL's best receivers, guys like Jerry Rice, Andre Reed, and Michael Irvin, and more often than not, he held his own. Yet for all of that, McDaniel's name rarely comes up when people talk about great Raiders. He didn't have the flashy persona of some of his teammates. He wasn't a headline grabber off the field. Instead, he was steady, consistent, and reliable. Qualities that don't always make the highlight reels, but win games. Fans who watched closely knew how much he mattered. He gave the Raiders stability in an era of transition, and while his career ended without the fanfare others received, those who remember him know the truth. Terry McDaniel was one of the best to ever wear the silver and black. 9. Willie Brown. In 1963, no NFL team called Willie Brown's name. He wasn't drafted, he wasn't celebrated, he wasn't even supposed to last in the league. But what happened next turned him into one of the most feared cornerbacks in football history. Brown got his first chance with the Houston Oilers, but they let him go before he ever played a game. Most players would have disappeared right there. Instead, Willie Brown fought for a spot with the Denver Broncos, and it was in Denver where he started to make noise, shutting down receivers and showing he could read the game like no one else. Then came the Raiders. When Al Davis brought him to Oakland in 1967, everything changed. Brown became the anchor of the Raiders' secondary. He wasn't just defending passes, he was changing the way cornerbacks played the game. Press coverage, bump and run, these techniques became part of his trademark style. Wide receivers hated lining up against him. And then, there was that moment. Super Bowl 11, January 9th, 1977. The Raiders against the Vikings. The third quarter, Willie Brown steps in front of a pass, grabs it clean, and runs it back 75 yards for a touchdown. That single play didn't just seal the game, it became one of the most iconic images in NFL history. His face, determined and unshaken, charging toward the end zone. Over his career, Brown collected 4 Pro Bowl nods, 3 Super Bowl rings, and a place on the All-Pro team 5 times. But his greatest legacy was leadership. Younger players looked him not just as a teammate, but as a teacher. He was the guy who knew where everyone should be before the snap, the one who turned defense into art. For a man the league never drafted, Willie Brown ended up writing his own chapter in football history. 8. Jim Otto. Jim Otto was not just a center, he was the center. For 15 seasons, from 1960 to 1974, Otto lined up for the Raiders. And here's the part that almost sounds impossible. He never missed a single game. Every snap, every hit, every brutal collision in the trenches, Otto was there. They called him Mr. Raider, and if you look closer, you'll understand why. He wasn't a star quarterback. He wasn't a flashy running back. He was a lineman, one of those players who rarely get headlines. But without him, the Raiders of the 1960s and 70s would not have been the same team. Otto anchored the offensive line in an era when football was far rougher than today. Helmets were thinner, pads were lighter, rules protected nobody. Centers took punishment from massive defensive tackles on every single play. Yet Otto lined up game after game, season after season, like a machine built for football. His durability was matched only by his excellence. Otto was named to the All-AFL or All-Pro team 10 straight times. That streak was groundbreaking, the kind of achievement reserved for legends. And yet, in mainstream football conversations, his name is often left in the shadows. Part of the reason may be that centers rarely get the spotlight. Fans remember touchdowns, long runs, and highlight reel catches. But who remembers the man snapping the ball, holding the line, and making sure the play could even begin? Jim Otto's greatness was hidden in plain sight. He played through injuries that would have ended most careers, multiple surgeries, a body rebuilt with metal and scars. Yet he kept showing up, not for glory, but for the team, for the game. Otto's story is not about fame. It's about endurance, sacrifice, and the kind of dedication that changed the Raiders forever, without the thanks it deserved. 7. Cliff Branch. When you think of wide receivers who could change a game with a single play, Cliff Branch should be the first name that comes to mind. He wasn't just fast, he was blinding. Defenses knew it, quarterbacks trusted it, and fans lived for it. Branch could stretch the field in ways that made opponents rethink their entire defensive schemes. Born in Houston, Texas in 1948, Branch wasn't expected to become a star. He was small compared to other receivers, and many scouts doubted he could survive the physical grind of professional football. But once he stepped on the field with the Raiders, all doubts disappeared. His speed made him unstoppable. He wasn't just running routes, he was outrunning history. Throughout the 1970s and into the early 1980s, Branch became the Raiders' deep threat, the kind of receiver who forced defenses to back up 10 yards before the snap. He led the league in receiving yards once, in receiving touchdowns twice, and tied the NFL record for the longest play from scrimmage, a 99-yard touchdown. For the Raiders, he was a weapon that could flip a game in seconds. But despite his numbers, his rings, and his highlight reel moments, recognition came late. For decades, his Hall of Fame induction was delayed. Names with fewer stats and less impact made it in before him. Raiders fans cried foul, but the silence from the league was deafening. Cliff Branch, one of the fastest men to ever wear silver and black, was left waiting. It wasn't until 2022, years after his passing, that Branch was finally enshrined in Canton. By then, it was too late for him to stand on that stage and hear the applause he had earned. The delay spoke louder than the honor itself. A man who changed how receivers were seen, who proved speed could dominate at the highest level, was celebrated only after he was gone.
6. Marv Hubbard. When fans look back at the Raiders of the 1970s, the spotlight usually falls on names like Ken Stabler or Fred Biletnikoff. But in the middle of that high-powered offense was a fullback who brought grit, toughness, and consistency every single Sunday: Marv Hubbard. Hubbard wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type of player who made headlines or highlight reels. What he did was harder. He wore down defenses, play after play, carry after carry.
At 6 feet and more than 220 pounds, he was a punishing runner, and he had no fear of contact. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it. Linebackers dreaded meeting him head-on because they knew he would not just try to get past them, he would try to run through them. From 1971 to 1975, Hubbard was the Raiders' workhorse in the backfield. He rushed for over 1,000 yards 3 times in that span, becoming one of the most reliable ground threats in the league. His style fit the Raiders perfectly: tough, relentless, and always ready for a fight. One of his most memorable games came against the Kansas City Chiefs. The rivalry was brutal, and Hubbard thrived in those clashes. He punished the Chiefs' defense with long, grinding runs that set the tone for the entire game. He wasn't just moving the chains, he was breaking the will of the opponent. Hubbard made 3 straight Pro Bowls, yet his name is rarely mentioned when people list the great Raider legends. Part of that is because fullbacks rarely get the glory. Their job is often thankless, hidden in the shadows of quarterbacks and wide receivers. But ask anyone who played against him, and they'll tell you, Marv Hubbard was the real deal. A fullback who defined toughness, and a Raider who gave everything on the field, every single time he touched the ball. 5. Mark Van Eeghen. Mark Van Eeghen was never the loudest man on the field. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make the highlight reels with 80-yard sprints or circus catches. But for nearly a decade in silver and black, he was the heartbeat of the Raiders' ground game. Drafted in 1974, Van Eeghen walked into a locker room filled with big personalities: Kenny Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, Dave Casper. Legends in the making. It would have been easy for him to disappear into the background. Instead, he carved out a place by doing the hard work nobody else wanted. Play after play, Van Eeghen delivered. From 1976 to 1980, he rushed for over 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons. In the postseason, when the pressure was at its peak, he became even more reliable. During the Raiders' run to their first Super Bowl title in 1976, it was Van Eeghen who carried the ball 18 times in the championship game, grinding down defenses and keeping the clock on Oakland's side. He wasn't just durable, he was iron. Van Eeghen played through injuries, kept moving chains, and earned the trust of John Madden, who knew he could always call his number. Madden once said Van Eeghen was a coach's dream, the kind of back who did his job without complaint and without ego. Yet despite being the Raiders' all-time leading rusher when he left the team in 1981, his name doesn't come up in most conversations about franchise greats. Fans remember Stabler's swagger, Branch's speed, Allen's power, but Van Eeghen's steady brilliance? Too often forgotten. What makes his story even more striking is how much his quiet consistency shaped the Raiders' identity during that era. While the team became famous for its bold image and wild personalities, Van Eeghen's toughness gave them balance. He was the steady hand in a storm of chaos, the workhorse behind the curtain. 4. Todd Christensen. When you think of the great tight ends in football, names like Kellen Winslow or Tony Gonzalez often take the spotlight. But hidden in the shadows of the 1980s stood a Raider who quietly redefined the position. At first, he wasn't even supposed to be there. Drafted as a fullback, his career looked like it would vanish before it began. He bounced around, nearly forgotten, until the Raiders gave him a second chance. And what he did with that chance was extraordinary. Christensen turned the tight end role into something new. Part bruiser, part wide receiver. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the flashiest, but season after season, he racked up receptions in ways few tight ends ever had. In 1983 and 1986, he actually led the entire NFL in catches, something unheard of for his position. He finished his career with 5 Pro Bowls and 2 Super Bowl rings, yet when fans talk about legendary Raiders, his name is rarely the first to surface. And then there's Clarence Davis. His story carries the same thread of being overlooked, until the moment he couldn't be ignored. Davis was never a headline star, but when the lights were brightest, he delivered. In the 1974 playoff game against Miami, the famous Sea of Hands game, it was Davis who came down with that miracle catch in a crowd of defenders. That play wasn't just a touchdown. It was a turning point in Raiders history, a single moment that shifted the franchise's path. But like Christensen, Davis didn't bask in the spotlight for long. He played his role, carried the ball, made the crucial plays, and quietly stepped aside while bigger names claimed the glory. These two men, so different in style, one a relentless pass catcher, the other a clutch performer, both carried the Raiders in moments that still echo today. Yet when fans talk about great Raiders, their names are rarely the first to surface. Number 3. Jim Plunkett. Imagine being labeled a failure before your story has even begun. That was Jim Plunkett's reality. He entered the NFL in 1971 as the #1 overall pick, carrying the weight of enormous expectations. The New England Patriots believed he would be their savior. Instead, he was crushed under injuries, constant hits, and a struggling franchise that never gave him the support he needed. By the late 1970s, the once promising quarterback was considered washed up. Some said he didn't have the arm anymore. Others claimed he never had the talent in the first place. And then there was the Raiders. Al Davis took chances on players others had written off, and Plunkett was one of them. At first, he wasn't even the starter. He sat behind Dan Pastorini in 1980, but when Pastorini broke his leg early that season, Plunkett was thrown into the fire. Most people expected disaster. Instead, something remarkable happened. Plunkett didn't just manage the offense, he sparked it. He launched deep balls with fearless confidence, he led the Raiders to win after win, and in that same season, he guided them all the way to the Super Bowl. Facing the heavily favored Philadelphia Eagles, Plunkett threw for 3 touchdowns and became Super Bowl MVP. From washed up to champion, his comeback was the stuff of Hollywood. But it didn't end there. 3 years later, the Raiders struck gold again. Plunkett stepped in once more and delivered another championship, leading the team to victory in Super Bowl XVIII. 2 rings, 2 unforgettable playoff runs, all from a man the league had given up on.
And yet, ask most NFL fans today to name the great quarterbacks of that era, and Plunkett's name rarely comes up. Despite 2 Super Bowls, he's not in the Hall of Fame. Analysts often point to his uneven regular season stats, or the fact that he wasn't a starter for his entire career. But the truth is simple. When the moment was biggest, Plunkett was unstoppable. He gave the Raiders 2 of their proudest chapters, but history hasn't given him the thanks he deserves. 2. Warren Wells. Warren Wells was a revelation for the Raiders in the late 1960s. Standing out with his exceptional speed and leaping ability, he quickly became a deep threat receiver, averaging an impressive 23.3 yards per catch over his 4 seasons with the team. His prowess on the field earned him 2 Pro Bowl selections and a spot in the AFL All-Star Game, highlighting his status among the league's elite wide receivers. Despite his on-field success, Wells' career was notably short. He played only 4 seasons with the Raiders from 1967 to 1970, amassing 156 receptions for 3,634 yards and 42 touchdowns. This brevity, coupled with the era's limited media coverage, meant that his contributions were often overshadowed by other contemporaries. Peers and coaches recognized Wells' talent and impact on the game. Raiders' legendary coach Al Davis was instrumental in bringing him to the team, seeing in Wells the potential to revolutionize the passing game. His performances in key games, including a standout 198-yard game against the Denver Broncos in 1970, showcased his ability to change the course of a match single-handedly. However, despite these accolades, Wells' legacy remains underappreciated. His career was marred by off-field issues, including legal troubles that led to his departure from the NFL. These controversies, combined with the era's racial dynamics and the overshadowing presence of other stars, contributed to his diminished recognition in the annals of football history. In the broader narrative of the NFL, Warren Wells' name is often overlooked. Yet for those who witnessed his electrifying performances, his impact is undeniable. His story serves as a poignant reminder of how talent can sometimes be eclipsed by circumstances, leaving behind a legacy that deserves greater acknowledgement. 1. A modern hidden gem. Every era of Raiders football has its warriors. And in today's game, one name rises quietly above the noise: Max Crosby.
Crosby wasn't a first-round darling. He wasn't the player every scout circled in red ink. In fact, when he was drafted in the 4th round of the 2019 NFL Draft, most analysts saw him as a depth piece. A guy who might rotate in, maybe give a few snaps, but nothing more. What they didn't see was the fire inside him. Max entered the league with a chip on his shoulder. His first training camps were brutal. He fought through injuries, broke his hand as a rookie, and still didn't quit. With a cast wrapped around him, he suited up and went to war. That wasn't just grit, it was a statement. And soon, the statement grew louder. Quarterbacks started to feel him breathing down their necks. By his second year, Crosby had established himself as one of the league's most relentless pass rushers. He didn't just chase plays, he hunted them. His motor never stopped. Offensive linemen knew the truth. He was coming, and he was coming all game long. The stats back it up. Multiple 10-digit sack seasons, Pro Bowl selections, leadership on and off the field. But numbers only tell part of the story. What makes Crosby different is his transformation. Off the field, he faced personal battles, struggles with addiction, moments that could have ended his career before it began. Instead, he turned them into fuel. He rebuilt himself mentally and physically, becoming a captain not just by title, but by example. And yet, even with all this, Crosby often flies under the radar. He doesn't get the same national spotlight as the biggest names in football. He isn't always the first defensive star fans mention. But ask anyone who lines up against him, they know. Max Crosby is proof that the Raiders' legacy of hidden giants hasn't ended. It's alive right now in silver and black.
So what do these 10 Raiders really tell us? That greatness doesn't always come with banners, headlines, or golden jackets. Some legends shine under the spotlight, but others fight in the shadows, pushing the team forward, reshaping the game, and never asking for thanks. From Iron Men like Jim Otto, who played through pain, to deep threats like Cliff Branch, who stretched defenses long before it was common. From unsung warriors like Marv Hubbard and Terry McDaniel, to modern firebrands like Max Crosby, these are the men who built the Raiders' identity piece by piece. They may not always make the highlight reels. They may not always get their names carved into Canton, but their impact is woven into every snap, every play, every battle on the field. Because in the end, legends aren't just in the hall. They're in the game, in the grit, in the blood and sweat that turn ordinary Sundays into history. And now, it's your turn. Who did we miss? Which Raider do you believe changed football but was never truly thanked? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories and memories. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden side of Raiders history, make sure to like this video, share it with another fan, and subscribe to History of Raiders for more untold stories from the silver and black. Because here, every Raider, famous or forgotten, gets their moment.